graduated from Stanford in 1949. In the latter part of 1949, I was on a platform installing Varco power slips in South Louisiana. So I know that I know they were drilling lots of wells at that particular time. And I remember I was on a platform, and the tool pusher told me Mr. Howard Rambin was coming on board. And Mr. Rambin at that time was the chairman of the board of the Texas Company, and he was a very, very important man. And the rig was tidied up in every single aspect, and I was there installing a power slip when Mr. Rambin came on, and he came over and looked at it, and he wanted to see it operate, and we operated the power slip for him, and I was, needless to say, I was thrilled that this could happen, and that was all in 1949 going into 1950. And now many things began to take place. The geologists found that, for example, in California, that there was oil out in the channel out there, but it was deep, and it was deeper than platforms were. In other words, it was very difficult to put a platform in that depth of water. And so in California, you had exploration starting in small boats would go out, and they would actually drill from the small boats. They would drill cores, and they would determine from those cores that there was really a very extensive field developing out in California, and they needed greater depth. They needed drilling machinery. They needed drilling equipment that could go to greater depths than we had seen before, and that involved drilling from ship-shaped hulls that could eventually prove the area. And in the Gulf of Mexico, you found jackups becoming very popular. And jackups could drill and explore in an area, and then when the field was developed, or when the field was, they knew that there was a field of great consequence, they could put in a very large platform. And so the platforms, aided and abetted by the jackup rigs, constituted now the start of what we saw of a movement of offshore drilling. In making up drill pipe, you had chains, and the chains were a dangerous thing. And so in the development of tools, you had different kinds of products, and you had engineers come in that began to sense what could be done to minimize injuries. And one of many types of drilling processes involved spinning chains. Spinning chains were dangerous. They would slip or they would break and they would hurt people. So such things as Kelly spinners were made. So you could actually either hydraulically or pneumatically, you could spin the Kelly, eliminating the chains. And you had such tools as you had what we call automatic roughnecks, where the spinning and the torquing were all done by a unit instead of individual tongs. And we got rid of the chains, and we tried to get rid of the tongs, and you could try to get rid of all kinds of dangerous operations that occurred on the rig floor. And that is principally what Varco did. And we actually began to shift into high gear, and that occurred particularly in 1969. And we went out and looked very, very hard to get what we felt was very advanced mechanical engineers from industry other than the drilling industry. And towards that end, we hired George Boyajeff, and we hired George away. He was one of the youngest product engineers with, George, you have to tell me the name of that company. The Bendix. George was with the Bendix Corporation, and he was a young product engineer and a very good one with Bendix. And we hired George away from Bendix, and that was in 1969. And we told George at that time what we really needed, and what we needed was from our standpoint, and that was the tool manufacturer. We needed somebody to come in and help us to look at how drilling was being undertaken and what could be done to improve the safety, to improve the economy, to improve the productivity of the operation. And those things were very important. And up until that time, many of the manufacturers of drilling equipment, we had been so close with each other. We were hiring each other's people. We were copying each other. We were turning into an ingrown society, you might say. So we brought George, and we gave George quite a challenge, and we told him what had to be done, and George rolled up his sleeves, and he did exactly that. There was a great deal of consolidation, and I think that principally occurred after the downturn, which we saw, which started really in 1982. We had a serious downturn in drilling, and the price of oil went down, and the Saudis attempted to discipline OPEC, and they warned the members of OPEC ahead of time, if you don't cut your production and if you don't adhere to what each of us individually is supposed to produce, we're going to simply go from 2 to 3 million barrels a day to 8 or 9 million barrels a day, which they did. And with that, why the price of oil went way down, really went way down. And at that point in time, a lot of rigs went down. And so people like Varco, all manufacturers and all people in the drilling and equipment and service industries, we suffered. And we suffered for a long time until the price of oil went up, until there was once again established a very viable market for refined petroleum products.
Were there major acquisitions in that era?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And what would those be?
Well, we as a company, we acquired all of our competition. We acquired every single company that we competed against in the year 1950. By the year 1990, we had acquired all of those companies, without exception. I think the one was Mission Manufacturing, and Mission made rotary slips and valves, but they were the only one that we didn't acquire.